I'm probably just one of many people that are getting ready to start talking about this book online, simply because of the television show. And to be quite honest, the reason I know about this book isn't even because of the television show. Though I know about this book because last year, in preparation to read Vagabond, I read Musashi. And in doing so, I talked about it here on the channel. And one of the first comments that I got was, "Have you read Shogun?" And I'm just like, I don't even know what Shogun is. So I go ahead and I Google it and I look into it and I look up exactly what Shogun is. And at the time, which was like last year, I was like, that looks fine. I felt like I've kind of read and seen that story before, and B, at the time I was just more interested in, give me a story about feudal Japan. I don't necessarily need an English character to steward me through the story, so to speak, which is what I had just gotten in Musashi, and I absolutely loved it. I would give that book an absolute 10 out of 10. So I put the idea aside and promptly forgot about it. And then the trailer came out, and holy shit, was I re-interested. And I went out and I bought the book, and then I read the book. So now here we are, and we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about Shogun. And I'm going to do a review of the book Shogun, and I'm going to do it as spoiler-free because, just in case you haven't read the book, or just in case you're planning on watching the show, and which, of course, I'm assuming we all are because that trailer is magnificent. Yeah, so I don't want to taint anything for you going into the book or going into the show, assuming the show is actually going to follow the book. Now, Shogun is the story of an English ship traveling to Japan when it gets caught in a storm and crash lands on the shore of Japan. We then start to follow our main character, Blackthorn, as an Englishman who crashed on the shores of Japan. In this time, England has never been to Japan, and the only people who have ever been there that are white are the Portuguese. They've been there for maybe 50 years, and they are starting to establish some trade and some communications, but the Portuguese are Catholic, and the English are Protestant. In the year 1600, this is a very big deal. So not only is Blackthorn now on the shores of a very foreign country with a very foreign culture, and the only white people they know are basically his sworn enemies. So nobody is really there that can do him any favors. All of this is pretty much just to say that he's in a bad situation. And if we're being honest, to a certain extent, this has become a little cliche and a little bit of a trope that has been done a couple times, I'm assuming since this book was written, but I don't know that for sure. I just know this is written in the 1970s, so I'm assuming most of the tropes that I'm familiar with came after this, or at least this was early on. And to an extent, the book plays out exactly like you would expect it to. White man crashes on the shore of Japan. He knows nobody, knows nothing. He's going to have to learn to communicate with these people. They're going to have to learn to communicate him. He's going to have to learn about them. They're going to have to learn about him. In the end, he'll probably learn how to communicate, maybe forge a few bonds along the way, and they might just learn how to work together. Think The Last Samurai. Actually, as a matter of fact, there are more than a few beats in here that feel extremely reminiscent of the movie The Last Samurai, which of course came out way after this book did. So it's not like this is stealing from that movie or anything. Actually, if anything, the movie probably stole from this. Also, that was a really good movie. Just throwing that out there. And honestly, before I get too far into this, I do really want to say up top that this is a very good book, because I do have a few nitpicks that are going to come up. Actually, one major nitpick that's going to come up later, but we'll get there. First and foremost, I do want to say that I was surprised with the character work in the book, because the characters are quite colorful and the characters have a whole lot of personality, especially a few of them, like just overloaded with personality, which for me in a book that was written in like 1970 was kind of surprising, because I've read a lot of books from that time period and they tend to be written a little bit more dry, maybe bland. Bland's the wrong word. Dry is a much better word, but they do have a much more dry way of being written, especially when it comes to character work. So for these to be as vibrant and colorful as they were and have as much personality as they did, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of surprising for a book from that decade, at least in my experience. Also, staying in line with characters, and on the flip side of that, I was also very fascinated by the fact that for like the first third of this book, though none of as much personality as these characters have, none of them are even remotely likable. Like, you're following all of these really shady Japanese people that are so deeply entrenched in the politics of what is happening in the world at this point in time that you're following scheming and schemes and schemers, and everybody's got an agenda and everybody's screwing everybody over. And there's just, you're like, wow, I don't like any of these people. I don't trust a single one of them as far as I can throw them. And then your point of view character is the one English dude in the story, and his name is Blackthorn, and he's just a real piece of shit for like the first third of the book. He's stupid, he's rude, he acts and behaves badly in situations he shouldn't be acting or behaving badly in. If he had a brain in his head, he would probably be doing something different. There is no reason why this guy should even be alive after page 5. The Japanese should have taken his head off, kicked his body into the ditch, and moved the fuck on. But he wears this like fancy plot armor for like the first third of the book while he continues to behave very badly in Japan. I understand that he has no concept of what this culture is and what they would expect from the behavior of somebody, especially a foreigner. But that doesn't change the fact that you're in a foreign land, period. You are at risk of dying. You're surrounded by Portuguese. You would think you would behave and act a little bit more like you don't want to die at every turn of the page, but whatever. Anyway, but the point of the story is here, even him, you're like, I don't like this guy either. Like, nobody for like the first third of the book, not one character did I like even a little. And this isn't for me dogging on the book and me being like, oh, well, what bad writing. No, I actually thought that was a quite fascinating approach to taking the right of the story, and it had me actually maybe arguably more invested in the story, just because I'm like, where is this going? What kind of an author says, you know what, I'm going to make this 1,100 page tome and make everyone shitty. Like, you're not going to want to read about any of these fucking people. Not a one. You're going to hate them all, including the one point of view character that you could possibly, that I think you're supposed to relate to. I don't know. But as it goes on, there is a point in the story where you really start to understand all of the different characters. You kind of start to see exactly who's doing what, who's scheming where, who's scheming how. You start to understand the different characters and who they are, the different plots and what they are. And you really do, at a certain point, get locked into the story, locked into the characters, locked into all the different plots and schemes. And now you're really moving with the story, and it's really pulling you along, and it's really pulling you through. You have a real, genuine investment in what's happening at a certain point. It's also very rich, very deep, and very detailed in the time of the year 1600-ish, I think, when this takes place. And it feels very genuine, true, and accurate. I use the word feels there because I don't know enough about this time period in Japan to say whether or not this is actually accurate. But from a layman-ish, somebody who's not super familiar with it, at the very least, it feels accurate. If you're more familiar with Japan in this time period, let me know if it's not accurate, because like I said, it feels accurate. This is also probably a pretty good opportunity to talk about the fact that this is not a very action-heavy book. There are a couple of action scenes, a couple of things that happen that are pretty action-heavy, but the book itself is really mostly people sitting in rooms and talking. A lot of politics is happening, a lot of scheming, like I keep saying, and a lot of like political positioning, but not a lot of action goes down. There's like, very little of that. So if that's what you're looking for, this book might not be that. This is a lot more people sitting in rooms and talking. also there's a point in the story where everything in the story is really telling you exactly which direction this story's going and how this is going to start to play out as we move into the last act. And then it doesn't go there. It goes somewhere entirely different. And I was just, that I appreciate. Any time that it could really set everything up like this is, I mean, it just keeps telling you over and over again, this is what we're doing. And then it goes over here. And I was like, I love a good misdirect. When it didn't go, I was like, whoa, no, we're over here, right? Like, but yeah, like I said, I love a good misdirect, and I love a book that can keep me on my toes and keep me not really knowing exactly where it's going to go and not know who's safe and who's not, to be honest. Even if where I thought the book was going to take us would have been essentially a little bit more action-oriented and a little less people sitting in rooms and talking, and maybe would have been a little bit more satisfying on a certain level. Either way, I still appreciate a good misdirect. Anyway, now with all of that said, done, and out of the way, let's get to my one big complaint about this book. And that is quite simply, with as good as this book is, as great as it was, as fun as it was, as good as the characters were, this book was quite simply too long. It is 1,100 pages of book. Now, that's not to say that I don't like a good book. I have read The Stand and Under the Dome. I've read 1Q84 and Musashi. I like a good, thick, 1,000 to 1,100 page book. I've read several of them. I quite genuinely enjoy a book that's just vastly long and drags you through this massive story. Some of them, quite frankly, need all of that space just to tell the story that they're trying to tell because it's so big. Some drag you through that 1,100 pages so invested in what's happening or so much enjoying what's happening, you don't even realize that you've been there for 1,100 pages. This is neither of those two things. The story is not so overwhelmingly vast that it needed 1,100 pages to tell the story. It's also not so much fun that I forgot that I was reading 1,100 pages. No, it's an 1,100 page book that feels like it's 1,100 pages. Somewhere out there in the universe, there is an 800 page version of this that is an absolute 9 out of 10 as far as a book read is concerned. As it stands, this book isn't that. This book is the 1,100 page version, and it feels just about 300 pages too long. This book, I would say, is much closer to an 8. I know that's not a big drop down, but I am going to have to drag the number down to an 8, which is still a good book, by the way. And I still recommend reading the book, as it is good. But if for some reason you are not necessarily a big, thick chunkum of a book reader, this one might not be the one. This one might not drag you through all of its pages. You might get halfway through and be like, what? I understand the feeling. Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say 8 out of 10. It really was a good book, just a little bit too long. As always, everybody, the link for my Patreon's in the description below. The link for my Discord's in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.